Hello and welcome to the Unlock Lab. I'm your host, Tosca and I'm super thrilled to be here for episode number 2. Today we're going to be talking about dismantling the walls of our self-protection. But first, let me share a little bit about who I am. So I do work around transformation. I help folks who are in transition or who feel stuck in their career and need support in getting to the next level. I also help organizations to put people first in their cultures. And I do all this work through keynote speaking, facilitating, professional development series, one-on-one coaching, you name it. I provide what is needed for the situation to help you to break through. So if you feel like you are in need and desire of a breakthrough, feel free to reach out. You can find me at coachtosca.com. All right, so let's get into it. This topic is one that is very near and dear to my heart because I have a lot of experience in putting up walls of self-protection. And there's a reason why I'm positioning this topic right after a conversation around boundaries, which was last week's episode. If you missed it, highly recommend going back and checking that out. And all of these topics I'm doing right now at this time of year around the holidays because I think they're especially important. The walls of self-protection that we put up are really keeping out potential love, potential receiving. And in a time of the year when we can be easily triggered or easily disappointed or even reminded of what we don't have, it can often lead to creating walls around ourselves. And you see the difference between a boundary and a wall is that with a wall, nothing comes in or goes out, right? Even the good stuff stays out. With a boundary, there's discernment in terms of what you are not allowing in to your world, your energy field, all those good things. So there's a distinction here, right? Between when we're putting up a boundary that's serving us because we're not letting in something that is harmful to us in the short or the long term. And there's a difference between that and not letting in things that do serve us or holding the possibility for the potential that something good can come through. So I want to start with a few ideas for signs that you may be building walls, because I have found in this work that some people don't realize that they're doing it, that they're just kind of keeping everything out and they think that this is serving them because it's self-protection from harmful things. So some things to think about in terms of if you might be building walls is, do you ignore or diminish compliments from others? There was a big period of time in my life where I was very dismissive of any kind of compliment or acknowledgement. I would tell myself stories that they were just saying it, they didn't mean it, it wasn't true. And that was me building a wall around letting anything good in. Because what if it actually wasn't good? Or what if it wasn't authentic or true? And I learned to receive. I learned to say, thank you. I receive that, to compliments, as opposed to saying things that are dismissive or even ignoring it altogether. For example, oh, this old thing, oh my gosh, I bought this like 10 years ago. It's like $5. Like that's not letting in somebody giving you some love, some acknowledgement, some compliments. So that's a really big one that I think a lot of people don't realize, that they're building a wall by not letting in those kinds of compliments. Okay. Second sign that you might be building a wall would be that you deflect conversations or questions about yourself. And again, there's a difference between you not feeling comfortable divulging in deeply personal and vulnerable things and you refusing to just engage to let somebody know more about you. And when you don't let people know more about you, what you're doing is you're missing the opportunity to build trust and build a relationship. So that's something you can really ask yourself if you're doing. And maybe even ask yourself, am I doing this with certain people or in certain situations or circumstances? That might help you get a better understanding of where are you putting up walls that aren't serving you. Another indication is if you rarely, if ever, take in support, especially when it's offered. This is a way that we protect ourselves and we stay in our cocoons and we say, I got this. I don't need anybody. And it's extremely detrimental to what's possible for us to have a life that's easier, that's more supportive, that's held by others. And trust, I am a key example of what it looks like to go from rugged individualism and not accepting support or even acknowledging that I need any to being in a place in my life now where I'm like, oh my gosh, I could do so much more if I had the right support at the right times. And I'll be honest, still to this day, there are times that I will feel, oh my gosh, am I being too needy? Am I taking too much support? And that's just because of some long held beliefs and conditioning that I've had to spend a lifetime of unwrapping and unwinding from. Another indication around building walls is when you're in your head all the time, right? And so much I think of how folks operate right now is they operate from their headspace. I am not eliminated from this, like I have to constantly ask myself, like, am I operating from my heart? Am I in my head? When we're just under constant stress and duress, like we let our minds take over. And a big reason I think for that is because we're protecting our heart and we're trying to figure things out versus allow our natural knowing and our inner guidance to lead us. And so if you are in your head all the time, how could you possibly be letting in vibrations and goodness and love and support? I'm often handing the baton from my head to my heart because my head is doing the work to say, is this person for me or against me? Are they with me? Are they not? Do they support me? Is it lip service? And so if I'm in my head when I'm interacting with folks, then I may not be aware of what I'm missing out on because I'm still trying to figure everything out just versus letting my heart be open to what's going to happen in that interaction. Another indication for the fact that you may be building walls is that you're giving people space even when they haven't asked for it. And also, you may be thinking in binaries. You're with me or you're against me. Perhaps you're seeking proof for your narrative about people and situations as opposed to being curious about what's actually going to happen. You're not being in the moment, but rather you're trying to predict what's going to happen. And that leads to sometimes creating stories versus really honoring the facts. So I rifled through a few of those. So if you want to pause and rewind and just consider which of these things might I be doing to indicate, oh my gosh, like I do build a lot of walls. I highly recommend it. And you can think about this in all aspects of your life. In the work environment, where are you really putting up walls and not letting people in to actually see you, the real you? Or where at home are you so jaded by the past that you may not even see that people closest to you in your life are changing and that it might be okay to keep your heart open? Again, the distinction between this is important. to understand where you really need a boundary because you are very clear about what's not working, and maybe you've tried to have conversations and that's not getting to a healthy place. That's one thing, but it's another thing to be putting up walls, not having conversations, not communicating expectations or desires because you're not allowing for something good to happen for you. I talk to clients all the time about the stories they're telling themselves about, the difficult conversations they might have to have, or they might fill in the blank of what they think their boss thinks of them when they actually haven't had a conversation. It's, it's just what we do to self protect. And in this time of the holidays, it is a beautiful time to just open that door a little bit and see what's possible and what magic you can let in because you're honoring that change is possible, and you're honoring that maybe you just don't know what that other person is going to do, because you know what, you never really know exactly what that other person is going to do. And this is also the time of year, going back to the conversation around boundaries, where we get to say what we need, and we get to find out who can support us in that and who can't. But if we don't ask, if we don't communicate, then how do we know what might be possible? If you don't say, like, maybe, for example, you have a really hard day coming up because, maybe it's the anniversary of someone passing that's close to you, and you may need extra support. And you could be telling yourself a story that everybody's busy, nobody wants to, sit with you in your grief and support you. And that may be entirely false. So what are you telling yourself around what you can ask for and what you need and what other people can do to support you? I think one of the big reasons that people hold themselves back for asking for the support that they need and dismantling those walls of self-protection is that they feel like they're a burden. And I get it. um like I said earlier, right, like I can be telling myself I'm being needy when actually I'm not. I just have some needs for support. But if we tell ourselves that we're going to be a burden to other people, we are disempowering other people from supporting us. We are disempowering other people for actually supporting us in a way that they wish that they could or they want to because they care about you. And we're basically saying that, hey, I have to take care of the other person. No, it's not your responsibility to take care of the other person. Your responsibility is to honor, what do I need? What do I want to ask for? What do I want to see it's possible? And if the other person can't handle it right now, they can't hold space for you, they can't sit with you in your grief, then that's on them to say, I love you. I wish I could. I'm actually dealing with a lot right now and I can't, but I will send you prayers, or I will, whatever they may be able to do or may not. But then you can say, I'm so glad that you told me because you're clearly going through a lot. But you see how healthy and opening that can be, to let somebody know that, like, it's okay that they couldn't support you, and to also let yourself know it's okay to ask for support. Yeah. So, look, I think that just like boundaries can change your life, keeping your heart open can change your life. I can't tell you how, I have a huge history of being taking things really personally. And whether that's somebody canceled on me last minute for a meeting, or a friend can't do dinner all of a sudden, but we had this on the books for like 3 months. It has taken me a long time to not take this personally, to see it as this is about divine timing happening. And to not shut them out and saying, well, forget it then. Like, I'm going to close that door because it hurts so much when I feel disappointed by somebody else. And the times that I have kept my heart open and decided not to take it personally and decided to just hold space, that I don't know what's going on in the other person's life and it's not about me, there's been some really miraculous things that have happened. And an example that comes to mind is, somebody I didn't know I had scheduled like a virtual coffee with, because I love doing that, because I just love like meeting people that I think I might vibe with. And this person canceled literally like 30 minutes before the meeting. And my inner critic was like, oh man, they clearly don't give a crap about you. Like, you're not priority. Here you did, you scheduled around this for the past 3 weeks. And I was really on the verge of just not even allowing that to be rescheduled at all. Right. And she reached out and was like, "I'm so sorry, and, like, can we reschedule?" And I had to give myself, I think it was, like, at least a week. I had to give myself a week to get out of my, like, emotional triggered reaction and actually ask myself, what's actually in my best interest here? Is it in my best interest to, r you know, enable my calendar to be reopened to her? Or is it in my best interest to just shut it down now? Well, look, I realized that it was actually in my best interest to give it another shot and to give her some grace for whatever happened in her life that day. And that actually ended up, I did reschedule, and that actually led to what was a really, really big opportunity for me in 2023. So you know, I have a lot of these kinds of examples of when I just looked at my reactions, understanding my emotions behind things before I put up a wall or a boundary. uh, would always, most of the time I come back to, this is just an old wound being opened up again, and I need to give grace, and I need to realize this isn't about me. And and look, and if somebody's going to mess around a couple of times, you better believe, like, calendar's going on block for you, buddy. And that has happened. But um, the magic is in keeping your heart open, being curious about what's possible, and giving people grace. And I think one of the reasons why we don't give others grace to the extent that I think we need to in today's world is because we don't give ourselves grace. So rather than give other people grace, we put up our walls because we don't want to get hurt, because we're not giving ourselves grace to show up a few minutes late because we had a crazy hairy morning, or we don't give ourselves grace to give ourselves forgiveness for decisions that we've made in the past. And the list goes on and on. So in this time of year, man, if we just keep our hearts open, I think we will be really surprised at what comes. And if this happens to you, I would love for you to reach out and let me know. Please email me at breakthrough@toscadimateo.com. I would love to hear your stories of when you stopped yourself from putting up a wall of self protection and instead decided to keep your heart open. So, if you haven't picked up on this already, a really big part of dismantling our walls of self protection come with the need to release the pain that we have from these wounds that cause us to put our walls up in the first place. Maybe that's some bad bosses, maybe that's some ex boyfriends or girlfriends or relationships. But we can get stuck behind our walls because we're too afraid to process the emotions of the past that made us feel feelings that we didn't want to feel. So And I can't tell you how many times I've worked with clients that say, "Oh my gosh." They realize that, how they're feeling today has something to do with something that happened like 20 years ago. And again, this is where it's like giving ourselves grace to say, yeah, of course. Like, of course, this is lingering back to that because that was never fully processed and fully healed. Or it's coming back around because we need to do deeper healing with that and deeper processing. And that's a gift in and of itself. So, a big part of this work is staying aware and present to the pain that gets triggered because it's a beautiful present to say, what is it that still needs addressing in my life? Because my guess is that it's a pattern in multiple arenas in your life if you're finding like you're putting up walls in a particular situation. Like, for example, you know, if you're on the search for a job, right? It can be very easy to say to yourself, "Well, I haven't heard back from them in 3 days. That's not gonna happen." And all of a sudden, you're protecting yourself and you're putting up the walls and you're expecting the worst. But that's because you've been hurt before. You haven't heard, from companies in the past, and then they ended up completely ghosting you and you never heard back, right? So you're already building a narrative as opposed to keeping your heart open and saying, "You know what? I haven't heard from them in 3 days, but I know that I'm telling myself a story about why, and I don't know what the truth is, so I'm gonna stay open to all kinds of truths that might be possibly here," you know? Maybe they are going back and figuring out how they can afford me because they wanna pay me top dollar. That's the kind of thing that we have to do for ourselves to keep our hearts open, to not close down and shut down, um, because we may be keeping out some things that are really beautiful and completely meant for us. And this really, this story is leads to that this whole idea around we have to separate fact from fiction, right? We may tell ourselves, "Oh, this always happens to me." Well, it probably doesn't always happen to you. Maybe it's happened a few times. So, what are the facts? Like maybe it's a colleague and you're like, "Oh my gosh, you know, she always throws me under the bus." Is that true? Has it happened once? Has it happened in every situation? Is it possible that maybe it won't happen this time? So, when our inner critics start filling in narratives, they're not serving us. So to keep our hearts open and to prevent ourselves from putting up our walls, we have to really understand what stories that we're telling ourselves, and we have to pressure test to say, is that really true, or is it just what I'm telling myself because I don't want to be hurt? A really big part of this work is staying open to possibilities and not telling ourselves a story about the ending. I say often to folks, don't write the story before it's written. Don't write the ending if it hasn't happened yet. Wait for it. Imagine what's possible. Visualize actually what you want to have happen in that interaction because maybe, just maybe, it will happen. I mean, and what comes up for me now is this idea of maybe, family gatherings have been tough for you in the past. And maybe you're already putting up your walls about what you're not going to say to your family or what you're not going to let in, or that you're going to like limit your time because, X, Y, and Z. But maybe trying to visualize what that interaction might look like with your cousin, with your parent, with your sibling. That's really powerful stuff because what you're doing is you're shifting the narrative in your brain and you're staying open and honoring what you actually want. And I think what happens is we forget that we have to spend time with honoring what we actually desire versus being afraid of getting what we don't want. So I know some of these concepts are, they might be new because we're so conditioned. We're so conditioned to expecting what we've always gotten, and a big part of this work is to say, "We don't know what the future holds." I've said it before, we have to pass the baton from our head to our heart because when we're afraid of our hearts getting hurt, we go right up to our head and we tell ourselves we know exactly what's gonna happen, and the truth is we have no idea what's gonna happen. So, take a practice of when you find yourself filling in a narrative that you don't know is true, just take a deep breath and come back into your heart space and say, "What is true here? And what is it that I actually am hoping happens? And what can I do differently that might encourage those different outcomes?" This leads me to the fact that we make a lot of assumptions about what we think people know about us and what we want and what we need. This whole idea of like we think other people are our mind readers and that they should know. Of course they should know. They've known me for 25 years. How do they not know that this is the thing that I want or this is the thing that I need? Trust me, people don't know. Like I'm gonna say 9 out of 10 times, they don't know what you need or what you want. I don't care if you've been married 50 years. We have to come back to really clear, honest communication about our needs and our desires. And I think that's one of the very first steps because if you can communicate what you need or what you desire and stay open to the possibility that that person can give it to you, well, then you're honoring the future more than you're stuck in the past. And from there, depending on what happens, you can make a decision. So if you ask for what you need or what you desire, and the other person does not have the capacity or the capability in that moment of time and who they are and how they can show up for you, then you can make a different decision going forward around your expectations or around what you ask of them the next time. And that's really smart because at least you tried and you honor yourself and you honor them in the process of discovering what might be possible. And I think you will discover a whole lot of surprises about what people can do. And yeah, I really invite you to play with some of this stuff over this holiday season. And you know what? It's not about taking the biggest risk with the most difficult relationship you have in your life. I think that when you're on that path of recognizing, "Oh my gosh, I have a whole lot of walls. I keep a lot of people out. I keep a lot of love out. I keep opportunities out." My recommendation is to build the muscle with by taking small risks along the way. So that's practicing being vulnerable with people and expressing your needs and your desires with things that aren't the biggest thing, you know? Like it might be a matter of, geez, we've been talking about having a virtual coffee for the past 3 months. It's not happened. I'm really disappointed. And I'm just curious if you think you might be interested in making time for it. Or if not, that's okay. I'll stop asking. But I just want you to know this is something I really want to do. And that's right. That's like a small risk. And this person could have been a colleague. It could have been a new relationship. Who knows? Um, but by taking these smaller risks about staying open to possibilities and what people are capable of, you're building the muscle so that you can build up to those really big relationships, those really important things with folks who maybe have disappointed you in the past, and you can test it out. Very, very early. I say this because I have some experience. I actually have a lot of experience in this department, as I've mentioned. And, you know, when I had a very breakthrough experience and there was a relationship in my life that really meant a lot to me that I wanted to see change. And I let this person know, somebody very close to me. And I said, this is what I want. And the response that I got back was, it was very clear that they couldn't receive what I was offering, which was offering for deeper connection and a, a wanting to build a bridge to a better, even more meaningful relationship. And I was devastated. I mean, I was devastated because I was really vulnerable and I put it all out there. And this is one of the most important relationships in my life. And that's where I learned, wow, okay, like maybe if I started smaller with being open about what I wanted, that wouldn't have been so hurtful or devastating. Um, but so that's what I offer to you. You are going to know in your heart, like, what's that next step and with what person or what situation. Like, if it's coming up for you right now, even listening to this episode, trust it. Whoever is coming to your mind or whatever, kind of conversation is kind of looping in your head right now, trust that that's the thing that you can start to look at in a deeper way. My gosh, I'm so excited that I'm having this conversation with you today because I know that there's so much more love for you out there than you even realize. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you keep your heart open most of the time. I know that there's still an opportunity for you to keep it open even more and in more situations and with more people. And that might mean a stranger on the street asking you for $5. It might be a loved one. It might be a colleague um, who has disappointed you in the past. But if you keep your heart open, people respond to that. They respond to the fact that you're going to suspend judgment, that you're going to suspend any narrative creation because you don't know what's possible. So, I hope that this has been helpful. If you have any questions about this, please reach out. I'd love to hear from you. Um, it's funny, right? Because doing this podcast is like, here I am in my home office and I'm I'm giving to you what I hope you need in this moment. And I love to receive back. I'm opening my heart to say, I'd love to receive back how this lands for you. It will help me get better at having conversations that are impactful for you. That's why I do this. And also, I'm going to request that you follow this podcast. If you enjoy this episode, that you rate my podcast on whatever platform you're listening, because that will just help get more ears and eyes listening and eventually watching, because I am videotaping this. These concepts that I think can really change your life trajectory. It can change what's possible for you, these topics. I firmly believe that, and I want that for you. I want you to take the bricks down because you've had a hard life, you've had some tough experiences, and I want you to know that it's possible to receive so much more than you think is possible. So, with that, I'm going to sign off. Thank you so much for listening to the Unlock Lab. As a reminder, I am taking questions and I will answer them live on the podcast. All you have to do is email me at breakthrough@toscadimateo.com, and I would love to address your questions. It's kind of like a Dear Abby or Ask Me Anything kind of thing. And I'm calling it Tosca All Access. So you have access to my wisdom in whatever situation might be troubling you. And I'm happy to keep it anonymous. If you email me, just let me know. Yeah. So this is dropping on December 5th, Tuesday, December 5th. I look forward to hearing how you enjoy it, and I will see you next time on the Unlock Lab. Ciao for now.